Hello and welcome to Wednesday's ESPN FC Live. Twice a week, 12 o'clock Eastern. For half an hour, we get the top names in the game. So that's why we've got Shaka Hislop today, the former Premier League goalkeeper who went to work early just so he could be on today and have that lovely backdrop behind him from Bristol, Connecticut. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. When you said top names in the game there, I'm wondering who we getting on today.
Burley's unavailable or didn't want to do it or one of those things. So today, you know what, Shaq? There's nothing like a knee-jerk reaction on the back of a small sample size, right?
That's what we do best here, Mark.
Of course, this is ESPN FC in a nutshell. So we're going as a result of what happened at the weekend from Friday through to Monday, we're going to tell you everything about the Premier League, who's going to win it, top scorers. And we're going to start 3 segments today. We're going to do that. We're going to look at everything else that's happening around Europe today. A lot of transfer speculation. That's in the middle part of today's ESPN FC Live. And then have a bit of fun at the end with an X or Y. Shaka has to choose. But we're going to start with the Premier League. Biggest surprise for you from the weekend, Shaq, was what?
Oh, biggest surprise. And I think there were a few. I'm going to say probably Brighton's win away to Everton. I thought, kind of given the changes, managerial changes over the summer, I really wanted to see how Brighton would start. And while Everton have their issues, I didn't expect a 3-0 win on the opening day of the season. That, and I'll probably throw Leicester in there. Again, managerial change for Leicester City as they lose their manager who brought them up against a team that I thought has a realistic shot of finishing top 4, and while they were second best for a lot of it, I thought Leicester responded really well in getting a draw. Deserved or not, I guess we can discuss, but again, just kind of given the changes from Leicester, I thought they'd struggled this season, but made a decent showing of the opening game at home to Spurs.
It could have been 5-0 down at half time.
Oh, easily could have been.
Right.
But they weren't. And they kind of took advantage of Spurs' wastefulness. And just as a little bit of a precursor, I have a feeling it's not going to be the last time I mentioned Spurs were in during this chat.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Brighton, by the way, because there's one player, and he actually was with your former team, but they let him go because of the financial fair play and everything like that. Yankuba Minta. And I know he went off with a head knock, but this kid it could be an absolute star. He's fearless. In pre-season, he was outstanding. And I don't know what it is about Brighton. Tony Bloom's got this kind of secret method that he uses for identifying players. It's basically bring them in for a fee, which is a reasonable fee, and then give them a platform to showcase their ability and sell them on for a lot of money. Chelsea have kind of paid for Brighton's existence over the next 20 years or so. Which team?
By the way, let me also add Aston Villa. Listen, and I know we're talking about a team that finished top 4 last season.
Is this a good or a bad surprise for you?
No, this is a good surprise.
Okay.
I watched Villa away to West Ham.
Yep.
And I really wanted to see how Villa would fare this season. And my concern for them was primarily when Champions League football started, how that would test their squad. And we saw Newcastle struggle with that last season. So I kind of felt that maybe that was going to be the case for Villa again. But every time I watch Aston Villa play, I am amazed at the football that they are able to produce.
Good sign.
They went to West Ham on the weekend and controlled the game. And again, we will talk about great teams in the Premier League, and there'll be a lot of focus again on Manchester City and Arsenal, and rightly so. But Aston Villa just continue to amaze me in the kind of football they're able to produce on what is a shoestring budget by comparison to the other two that I just mentioned.
It's not like me to take half of the allocated 10-minute time for 7 questions on just one question. So let's move on swiftly to question 2. Which team let you down the most in the Premier League at the weekend?
And again, as I mentioned, Tottenham Hotspur. I love Postecoglou. I thought what we saw from Spurs, particularly in the first half of last season, really was a breath of fresh air for a club that had been struggling to produce that kind of football that their fans had been demanding for so long. Yes, okay, it fell off to the back end of last season, but coming in, I don't think anybody expected Spurs to be anywhere near the top four. They're threatened for long periods. Starting this season, Postecoglou's second season in charge, I was expecting more, and maybe they delivered more, excluding the goals in the first half against Leicester. But then all of a sudden, Jamie Vardy scores that goal. Jamie Vardy, I have a feeling this is not the last time we're going to be speaking about him today. He scores that goal, and Spurs just didn't know how to react. They got this right hook. It rocked them, and they just looked unsteady for the rest of the game. And that for me was a big surprise, because if you are going to be competing at the highest end of the Premier League table, you have got to be able to manage games better. You have got to be able to concede goals and not simply go to pot. And I thought that's what Spurs did, and that was disappointing.
So Spurs aren't your Premier League team to beat. Who are?
My team to beat, I have Arsenal as winning this time around. I just wonder if Manchester City's kind of time is coming. In that some of their star players are starting to age out. Not a whole lot of movement in the transfer window, and I know there's still time to go, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that as well before we call it a day here. But I just feel that Arsenal continue to improve, continue to get better. My one caveat is that I don't feel they've addressed their biggest need, which is for an out-and-out striker. Even so, if they had, I would say without any hesitation that Arsenal go on to win it. It's with some hesitation that I think they just edge Manchester City, and that's more about City regressing than Arsenal, as I said, truly addressing their greatest need.
Which player impressed you the most at the weekend?
Jamie Vardy, as I mentioned again. Well, how old is Jamie Vardy? 37?
74.
Yeah, I feel it's somewhere around there. Coming up from the Championship, and again showed kind of his feistiness, shall we call it, and that little kind of show of his badge and exchange with Romero. Took his goal really well. Could have, if not should have, had a second. And it shows that at the very least, he hasn't lost any of his passion. He's not the player that he was five years ago, but he's still a player that you have to have a plan for. And at his age, that's saying a lot. Added to that, I will join the chorus, albeit very early chorus, that we saw from Odegaard and Arteta around Bukayo Saka. The way he took his goal, had an assist to go with it. He has to have a big season if Arsenal are to go on and win the title. If this version of Arsenal, and again, I've expressed what they need most, we still have a few weeks left in the transfer window. He has to have a big season, and it's been a very good start, albeit a one-game start, but as we established, it's never too early for us to get carried away on FC.
74 is twice 37, which is his age. We knew that. Anyway, didn't it? By the way, I've got two players for you from the weekend, and we're going to get through this a little bit quicker. Brian Mbeumo will be another season. He'll be a star for Brentford without Ivan Toney. He'll just get goals. And the other one is Onana, Aston Villa. That's a good signing.
Very good signing
from Everton, especially with Douglas Luiz going
early on. How good was that? Yeah.
Wow, what a header! Okay, we've done the player. What about the manager? Quickly, was there one? What about the Brighton manager? Are you going to give him the kudos this week?
I absolutely have to. Again, coming in with 31 years old, a young manager.
6 years younger than
right.
What's his name? Milner and Vardy.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, and coming in, given everything that we've seen from Brighton over the last couple of seasons under Potter and then to Zerbi, that is not an easy seat to take over. And while Brighton, by their standards of the last 3 or 4 years, were a little bit disappointing, particularly back end of last season, what a start it was to this one. And credit to him for that.
So is there a correlation then if he gets manager and Brighton get your biggest surprise, that Everton get your biggest disappointment at the weekend?
Yeah, Everton, again, my biggest disappointment. And I, it's difficult to know what to expect from Everton. And while, yes, they kind of struggled by what you'd expect last season, I thought they started last season well, and then the points deduction, and they just couldn't get it back together. But this is a blow to start at home. The expectation around Everton is a whole lot more than losing on your own patch, 3-0 at that. Yeah, biggest disappointment.
Okay, that's Shaka's team in trouble from the Premier League weekend. We were asked to talk about the most surprising thing about Real Madrid in their opener. I think it has to be that Luis Garcia avoids serious injury pre-game with the demonic mascot setting everything on fire. And, he let out an S-bomb live on ESPN during Mallorca against Real Madrid.
So that's your biggest surprise, that Luis Garcia let out an S-bomb?
No, the biggest surprise is thankfully he's okay, and he didn't get burned. Even though all these memes are already going around, I've got him running around in flames and poor Alexis with things coming out her head. Anyway, plenty more time ESPN FC to talk Real Madrid, who this weekend have got another tough game like Barcelona have against Athletic Club. But we're going to stick with the Premier League and try and give you the latest on Ilkay Gundogan, because it's looking like a return to Man City might be on the cards. Is this a bigger story, the fact that Barca are letting him go, or that Man City are getting him back?
Man City getting him back, for me, is by far the bigger story. Barcelona letting him go makes total sense to me. Barcelona, given their financial woes, which I can make no heads, no tails about, that's just a little bit of a disaster. But then Hansi Flick wanting to play a higher press and feels that with an aging Lewandowski and an aging Gundogan, he couldn't get the best out of what would be his attackers in terms of that press. Gundogan, understandably, is surplus to requirements, because you want that out-and-out striker in Robert Lewandowski. Manchester City going back in for a 33-year-old, or albeit a 33-year-old, who served them so wonderfully well up to a couple of years ago. That's a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought Pep Guardiola would go in a different direction, a younger direction. So that for me is the bigger head scratcher of the two, without question. Not that Gundogan isn't a good player, not that he won't serve Manchester City very well, at the very least in the short term. Again, he's 33, so we have to be thinking short term here. I just didn't think that once he left, that Pep Guardiola would go back in for it.
For Barcelona, meanwhile, I commentated on a couple of their games pre-season. He had a very young squad, plus the likes of Lewandowski and others. But at the weekend, it was Bernard and Casado in that midfield area. So, yes, the financial issues have been well documented, but the quality that's coming through La Masia. They signed Pau Victor as well from Girona. I think Hansi Flick in this 4-2-3-1 that he prefers has made his mind up. It's not a case of, he's German and I'm German, I want to keep Gundogan. He's like, okay, I'm going to keep these players in my team because I know these youngsters are good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the direction that Barcelona needs to go in. We've discussed their financial issues, and I know they continue to be linked with any number of players, which, again, Kiers are the latest, is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, given those financial issues. But so far, so good for Hansi Flick. You start the season, you get a good win. Young players continue to bear themselves in, as we saw over the preseason. That's all you could ask. And in terms of what the expectation is, I know we didn't touch in any meaningful way on Real Madrid, but they dropped points away to Mallorca. So all in all, it's a very good weekend for Barcelona. Very, very good weekend for Hansi Flick.
By the way, you've set it up. May as well get the question in right now. I thought Carlo Ancelotti's comments, Real Madrid, were very interesting afterwards. He says, look, we've got to find a way. We've got to find a better balance. It's great looking forward and seeing all these stars. Mbappe's come in, Vinny Jr. left, Rodrigo on the right, fitting Bellingham in as well. But they've got to work without the ball as well. And that was interesting from Ancelotti.
I thought it was, and especially given how good that front three, or if you want to call it front four, including Bellingham, worked against Atalanta in the European Super Cup. I was expecting so much more. And while yes, you could look back and say, well, Real Madrid won, beaten Mallorca twice, 1-0. Certainly in Mallorca last season, it was an all-change squad. But Mallorca, a team that finished 15th in La Liga last season, to start this one, I expected more from Real Madrid. Maybe it is a little bit too top heavy. Maybe that's the issue. And if that's the case, start to report for Rodrigo, he's probably the man who will get the hook at this point. But in truth be told, given performances, I don't think Mbappe was that good. I don't think Vinicius was any good. It could be anybody. It will end up being Rodrigo for obvious reasons, but maybe that's where things kind of where the imbalance is for Real Madrid and Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, I've done well there to keep the Premier League news to include both Barcelona and Real Madrid. But hey, tenuous links, you know what it's like. We go off on tangents from time to time. But I started talking about Gundogan and Man City. Let's go to the other side of the city, Manchester United. A few days to react and reflect on what you saw. And before Joshua Zirkzee came on, you're kind of thinking, who's going to score the goals here? Yeah. Bruno playing in a more advanced role in the first half. I thought they were better when he played a little bit deeper, kind of as the 8 or as the 10. And Zirkzee, he made a difference. What's the biggest concern for you, though, having seen that Manchester United performance, or is it still too early to tell?
Well, it's still very early to tell. First of all, let me just say, I thought Mazraoui equipped himself really well coming in. I still a little bit uncertain about him. And I know De Ligt came off bench very late on, but I think he's a big improvement on everything they have there. I think he'd be a huge player for them. So I like that signing. Zirkzee took his goal really well, but to your point, for all Manchester United's football against a Fulham team, I'm not sure are going to be that great. It just felt like up until 87 minutes, it felt like here we go again with Manchester United, and that for me was kind of. I'm sure how Manchester United fans felt, that despite the signings, despite the promise, and maybe even the momentum that winning the FA Cup might have brought, it just felt like here we go again. Then Zirkzee pops up, and all of a sudden, really good finish to be fair. All of a sudden, we having a deeper look at Manchester United. So I'm going to reserve judgment on United for right now, because I think that closing 3 minutes by injury time kind of changed the conversations around them. But we'll see how they go. Happy to take a win on opening day of the season, but as I say, for large spells, not a lot to report.
Yeah, we were talking at the weekend. For them right now, with players coming back and new signings, no diagrams on a scorecard. Get the 3 points, work on things, but you do so from a stronger position. Final one in the Premier League news today is Arsenal. Now, you mentioned earlier about you think a striker is the main need. Looks like Mikel Merino might go ahead. He wasn't in the Real Sociedad squad at the weekend because of the interest from Arsenal. We wait to see if that one will go ahead. But you spoke about a striker. And when you read and you hear on ESPN FC that Ivan Toney, Saudi Arabia, 1 year left on his deal, it might be for under 50 million. Is that, I mean, I doubt the money that Saudis pay, certainly in wages, I think they can blow any team in the world out the water. So is that what it's down to? Or do you think Arsenal should be making a move for him or somebody else to fill that striking position?
Listen, money aside, if Arsenal could, for me, I think the best striker out there who's available is Victor Osimhen. And I know he's got, by all reports, he's got sights set elsewhere. So okay, if he's not available, then absolutely yes. Ivan Toney, I think you go for him. I think that Arsenal desperately need that out and out striker. Now, again, Ivan Toney is already in London. I think it ticks a whole lot of boxes for both club and player. Can you compete with that money that Saudi Arabia may be offering? No, but I think you've got to stake your claim. Ivan Toney wants to keep himself in the reckoning, in and around the England squad. I think there's opportunity for him to make that move down the road. If I'm Arsenal, I am trying to do everything I can to convince him to come to North London as opposed to head out to the Middle East.
I'll give you some other kind of Premier League news. Nottingham Forest potentially looking to sign Eddie Nketiah. They're close to agreeing a fee there. Newcastle, they've had 3 or 4 bids for Mark Gahey, none of them yet acceptable. Just because Joachim Andersen has left Palace or is in the verge of doing so to go to Fulham, that doesn't necessarily mean that Palace wouldn't sell another centre-back. Just got to feel for those that have got Dean Henderson in their fantasy Premier League team, because you'll have nobody in front of him. And the other one I thought was interesting, quick word on this before we get to the final segment today of the Would You Rather X or Y. Raheem Sterling, surplus to requirements now. His agents can put whatever statement they want out. What would be a good landing spot for Raheem Sterling? Staying in the UK or heading abroad?
I can only see abroad, and I can only see the Middle East, Saudi Arabia or somewhere of the likes. Raheem Sterling is on an awful lot of money that nobody is going to pay. Well, nobody. Let me put it this way: the only club in Europe who would take Raheem Sterling now with the money that he's on is Chelsea. The only club with as crazy a transfer policy, crazy enough a transfer policy to sign Raheem Sterling is Chelsea. So if you're surplus to requirements there, I'm not sure where the landing spot is, unless there's some kind of agreement that Chelsea is going to pick up 75% of his wages or something of the sort. And even so, who takes that chance? And you can't see Raheem Sterling going on to the Championship or anything of the sort. I just don't see it. So for me, it's got to be the Middle East. They're the only ones who can afford him, and he's still a big enough name in the game. I think that he attracts interest from abroad.
Okay. And finally, as they say, would you rather? So we're going to give you 2 scenarios. You've got to just quite simply pick one of them. And this isn't all about Shaka Hislop, the goalkeeper, as the first question suggests. Would you rather play alongside Steven Gerrard or Frank Lampard in midfield when they were at their peak?
Let me see. Let me put it this way. I played alongside Frank Lampard.
Yeah, I know you did.
Not at his peak. I never played alongside Steven Gerrard at his peak, but he kept scoring on me while he was playing on the other side in his peak. Listen, I'm going to go with the player I know in Frank Lampard. I love playing in the same side with him during our shared time at West Ham. So I'm going to give Lampard a nod, and Steven Gerrard can keep his goal tallies as high as it has been, thanks to me being in the other goal.
We won't mention the 2006 FA Cup final, and you were 2 minutes away from winning it in Cardiff.
Just move on, Mark. Move on.
Let's move swiftly. I love this question. I don't know who came up with it, but I'm sure they'll tell us in the chat so we can give them the kudos that they deserve. Would you rather, Shaka, face a penalty against prime Cristiano Ronaldo or take a penalty against prime Manuel Neuer?
I'd prefer to face a penalty from prime Ronaldo. Listen, facing penalties is what I know. And in all honesty, as the goalkeeper, there's no pressure on you. There's no pressure on me to save, let alone save a penalty from prime Cristiano Ronaldo. So there's only upside to it. Manuel Neuer standing between the sticks. Anybody who's taking a penalty who's not used to taking a penalty will tell you that 12 yards might as well be 45. It feels like so much more, and the goal just shrinks. So just again, give me the scenario that I know, and that is facing a penalty. Thank you very much.
Hey, by the way, here's a little nugget for you, which I thought was really interesting. Callum Wilson of Newcastle in training will take penalties from 13 yards, not 12 yards, so that when he has to take one in a match, it feels like the goals are bigger because he's closer. How about that?
That's odd.
It's smart though. This was his own.
I see the sense. I see the sense in it. But if you hit it exact, so I think the really good penalty takers are about muscle memory. So 12 yards out, this is how I'm going to hit it. This is where the ball is going to go. If you move the ball an extra yard out, then all of a sudden it gets a little bit different when it is exactly 12 yards
Maybe.
out.
I shouldn't have asked a rocket scientist to analyze something like that. You should have just found that's interesting.
I've never had the opportunity to say muscle memory on air before, so thank you very much for the.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Would you rather manage the US men's national team or Manchester United if Ten Hag was no longer in charge?
Yes, it is. I'd prefer to manage Manchester United. I think Manchester United are still one of the biggest clubs in world football. I think the upside to doing a good job at Manchester United is a whole lot higher than the upside to doing a good job with the US men's national team.
Okay. Would you rather scrap VAR entirely or keep with it?
Keep with it. I'm a big advocate for VAR. I think we are at a stage in the game where refereeing mistakes and unavoidable refereeing mistakes can be costly. So while maybe it speeds things up somewhat, I think inevitably technology has to play a part in the game long term. We're still in the very early stages of VAR, so there's still a whole lot of kinks. Once I think you kind of work through the system, VAR will vastly improve not just how we are now, but how games are officiated and the overall fairness in football.
Okay. The next one is an interesting one, right? Pretend you're not sitting talking to me answering these questions and pretend you're in your prime, but also pretend you don't have an agent. So you get two calls. One is from Enzo Maresca at Chelsea saying, we've only got 8 goalkeepers. We need to sign another one. The other is from Erik Ten Hag, Manchester United, saying, look, Shaka, we want you to be our number 1 to replace Andre Onana. Right now, given the state of the two teams, and that's your choice. You can't, unless you want to, you can't say you're not going to either. Who would you choose, Chelsea or Man United?
Right now, I choose Manchester United. You just have to look at certainly Manchester United. Finished last season, which certainly is better than Chelsea's. You look at the squad that Chelsea have, and it makes absolutely no sense. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Saying all that, though, I will say that everything Maresca has said, certainly over the last few days, I've been impressed with. The fact that he's just coming out and saying, listen, as much as we have 40-plus players, 20 of them are over there. I don't see 20 of them. I'm working with this squad. I think that's what's needed. That kind of strong character and strong position is what's needed at Chelsea. So I'm very impressed with that at the very least. But all other things being equal, I still think Manchester United are in a better position as a football club right now than Chelsea.
Would you prefer to manage both, one or the other?
I think I'd still prefer to manage Manchester United.
Less players to have to keep happy,
right?
I suppose. I want to take you back finally to May 2013. And the Leicester City bench had on it Harry Kane and Jamie Vardy. Kane was on loan there because of the shame of missing a penalty in his debut against Hearts. There's your Hearts reference today, Shaka. So, who's had the better career? Which career would you rather have? Jamie Vardy with his medals to Christian Romero, or Harry Kane with his ability but 0 trophies so far?
Listen, I still believe that this is a team game and team awards matter most. As we sit right now, Jamie Vardy. Listen, in 12 months' time, we may be talking about Harry Kane as being a Bundesliga champion, but as we sit right now, 2024, Harry Kane does not have that team accolade that Jamie Vardy has. Jamie Vardy, and given that one Premier League title with Leicester, has written his name in footballing history in a way that I don't think many have or will at any time in the future. So I go for Jamie Vardy.
Okay, we'll do this all again on Friday, preview the weekend action across Europe. Goodbye, Shaka.
Goodbye, Mark.